There was meat right in front of her, enough to save her child. But she chose to share it with a dog she didn't even know. The next day, someone died. In a city forgotten by fortune, a young mother lived a life of quiet desperation. Each morning, she would bundle her small child against the chill and walk the sprawling streets, a tray of cheap, colorful candies in her hands. Her voice, a soft melody against the city's roar, offered sweets to hurried past. Candy. Just a coin for a smile, she would say. Sometimes, a kind soul would stop, and the clink of a coin meant a warm meal for her child. Most days, however, the city was a blur of indifferent faces. The candies would remain, and their stomachs would ache with an emptiness that mirrored her purse. Her world was small, confined to the survival of her child, a love so fierce it was the only warmth she knew. One night, the wind bit with unusual cruelty. The city lights, usually a beacon of life, seemed distant and cold. She had sold nothing, not a single piece of candy. Back in their small, drafty shack, her child lay listless, a fever burning through his small body. His cries were weak, whispers of hunger that tore at her heart more than the cold ever could. She had nothing to give, no food, no medicine. Her own hunger was a dull familiarity, but his was a sharp, terrifying blade. She felt the icy grip of panic, a mother's primal fear of failing the one life she was sworn to protect. The world had shrunk to this single, agonizing moment. Her child was starving, and she was powerless. Desperate, she left him sleeping fitfully and wandered back into the labyrinth of darkened streets, hoping for a miracle, a lost coin, anything. In a narrow, trash-strewn alley, a flicker of movement caught her eye. It was a dog, a creature of skin and bones, its fur patchy with mong. It stood on trembling legs, a shadow of an animal that had long forgotten what a full belly felt like. But around its neck, impossibly, was a small, cloth bag, and from that bag wafted the unmistakable, tantalizing smell of meat. Eat was phrase, clearly stolen from a nearby market stall. A wave of conflict crashed over her. Hope and guilt warred within her soul. Here it was. The miracle. The meat in that bag was life. It was a warm meal, strength for her feverish child. She could snatch it. The dog was weak. It wouldn't fight back. Or she could drag the dog to the market owner, report the theft. A small reward, perhaps enough for some rice and broth. Either choice would feed her child. The thought was a searing flame in her exhausted mind. Her child's face, pale and thin, flashed before her eyes. The choice was clear. Or was it? She looked at the dog again. Its eyes, dull with sickness and starvation, held no malice, only a desperate will to survive, just like her own. It was a fellow traveler in this cruel world of hunger. In its suffering, she saw a reflection of her own. She saw a creature pushed to the edge, doing what it must to live another day. How could she punish it for that? How could she take everything from another being who was just as desperate as she was? Slowly, silently, she knelt in the filth of the alley. The dog flinched but didn't run. It seemed to understand she meant no harm. Her hands, trembling, reached out not to steal, but to share. She gently untied the small bag from around the dog's neck. The scent of the meat was dizzying, making her own stomach cramp with want. With painstaking care, she divided the contents. She laid half the meat on a piece of discarded paper for the dog, a silent offering of communion in their shared misery. The other half, she clutched tightly in her hand. It was for her son. As the dog began to eat, weak but ravenous, she turned and hurried back to her shack, her heart a tangled mess of hope and a strange, quiet sorrow. She cooked the meat over a tiny, sputtering flame, the aroma filling their small room. She woke her child and fed him the morsels, piece by piece. He ate, his first real food in what felt like an eternity. For a brief moment, watching him eat, a fragile sense of peace settled over her. She had done it. She had provided. She lay down beside him, her own hunger forgotten, and drifted into an exhausted sleep, praying the food would be enough to break the fever, to bring the light back to his eyes. The next morning, The city awoke to its usual clamor, but in the small shack, there was only silence. The fever had not broken. The small portion of meat, a desperate gamble, had not been enough. Her child, her world, her reason for breathing, was gone. The sun streamed through the cracks in the walls, illuminating a scene of absolute devastation. The warmth of the morning felt like a mockery. The world kept spinning. People kept rushing, but her universe had collapsed into a single, silent point of unbearable pain. Days blurred into a haze of grief. She didn't leave the shack. The unsold candies sat untouched, their bright colors a cruel reminder of a life that no longer existed. Then, one afternoon, a knock echoed on her flimsy door. She opened it to find strangers on her doorstep, a kind-faced woman in a veterinarian's coat and a few others in animal rescue uniforms. They were looking for someone, they explained. A woman who had shown kindness to a stray dog with severe mange a few nights ago in an alley. The story unfolded, each word a fresh wound. The dog, it turned out, belonged to the market butcher. It had gotten lost and sick, and in its confusion and hunger, had snatched the bag of meat and run. After its encounter with the mother, the dog, having eaten its share, had somehow found its way back to the market. It had returned to its owner, still carrying the same cloth bag, now empty. It had, in its own way, returned what it had stolen. The butcher, astonished and moved, had contacted the local animal rescue, who tracked the dog's path, hoping to find the person who had shown such compassion. Their search had led them here, to this shack, to her. They saw her grief, the emptiness in her eyes. They heard her story, the impossible choice she had made. Moved by her selfless act, in the face of her own profound need, they offered help. They found her a job, a small but clean apartment, a chance to start over. They gave her a new beginning, a path out of the darkness. The city that had been so indifferent now showed her a compassionate face, all because of an act of kindness to a creature she didn't know. But a new home cannot fill the space of a lost child. A new job cannot quiet the echoes of a voice that is no longer there. Every night, in her new, quiet room, she would pull out a small bundle of worn clothes. His clothes, she would hold them to her face, inhaling the faint, lingering scent of her son. The fabric was a tangible link to a love that now existed only in memory. And in the silent darkness, a single question would rise. Oberend, obere relentless torment. If I could feed a dog that wasn't mine, why couldn't I save my own blood? Her goodness had, in a way, been rewarded. The world had eventually shown her kindness, but the reward felt hollow, a bitter irony. Goodness is not a contract. It's not a transaction where we give compassion and are guaranteed a happy ending in return. It is a choice made in the heart, an instinct to see ourselves in the suffering of others. But what happens when that choice leads to an unbearable loss? When the heart does what it believes is right, but the world remains cruel and unforgiving? Where does the blame lie? Does it lie with her for sharing what little she had? Or does it lie in a world that would force a mother into such an impossible choice in the first place? This is the weight she carries, a question with no answer, in a life forever changed by one night of hunger and one act of impossible grace. Thank you for watching. If you were moved by this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that makes you think and feel. And remember to be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.